Good evening, everybody. How you doing? It's Sunday afternoon, and like I said, I'll try and sit down and record a couple of videos now, so I've got something to post over the next couple of weekends. I've got a couple of busy weekends coming up, and yeah, I figured I'd get something recorded now to try and have something to actually post when I'm away. So I figured a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I mentioned that I'd try and cover a few questions that I regularly get asked. I often get asked for sort of little bits of advice and things like that about piercings and stretching in particular. I figured I'd try and cover a couple of things that seem to get asked quite regularly. In fact, on that video, I had a couple of people asking similar things. Excuse me, let me. I figured I could sit down and try and address a couple of the topics and hopefully give you some information that might help you with your piercings and your stretching journey. And yeah, hopefully things I've experienced myself, things I've read about, and research I've done into these different things over the years that I might be able to share, and yeah, hopefully people will be able to learn a little something. So what I figured I'd talk about is not necessarily my stretching routine, but things I've learned while stretching that I think are quite important and can help a lot of people. So I often get asked things like how long should you leave it between stretches for various different piercings. Now, first of all, everybody's body's going to be slightly different, and all sorts of different things will affect this stuff. It's impossible for any one random person to tell strangers, especially over the internet, exactly how long you should be waiting between stretches and this sort of thing. But there's definitely some basic guidelines that I follow, at least, and I figured maybe they can help other people out a little bit. So often when you look online, this is where I found all my information to start with. People will go on, I don't know, say Google, and search how long should I wait between stretches. So often, one of the most common things I see come up when I Google something like that is 1 millimeter per month. Stretch it once a month, 1 millimeter. And that is, in my opinion, I say obviously I'm not a professional piercer or a medical professional or scientist or anything of the like. I'm just someone who has done quite a bit of personal research into it, and obviously I have my own experience as well in the matter. But yeah, so from my personal experiences, this is far too quick, definitely. I mean, I've done it in the past. I've damaged my ears and cut my ears in the past, stretching piercings too quick, so I've learned the hard way in a lot of cases, as well as from actually reading both other people's experiences and strange noise, as well as other people's experiences and sort of various medical-esque websites and things like that. But yeah, first of all, I think the terminology doesn't do it any favors. When we obviously always call it stretching, which isn't really what you should be trying to do, because stretching implies applying some sort of force and forcing your piercings bigger by, like, literally stretching them, and that isn't really what you should be aiming to do. What the best way to increase the size of piercings, try not to say the word stretch, and it's hard because it's just what I'm used to saying. But really, the best way to increase the size of your piercings isn't to forcibly stretch them. What you really want to be doing is gently encouraging the tissue to grow, and you do that by putting slightly bigger jewellery in. Like, for instance, obviously I've got a little bit of a gap. Hopefully you can see that. Got a little bit of a gap in each of my ears at the moment. And so when I would put a bigger piece in, I don't want to completely fill up the gap. You want to put something in, obviously, that's bigger than what you've got in, but you don't want it to be tight and to actually put any sort of force on it, which is why I'm trying to shy away from the word stretching. It's by doing that you're not going to be damaging the actual tissue itself at all, but you're going to be applying enough new stimulus to actually grow new tissue, and that's sort of the end goal, really, when it comes to stretching piercings steadily and keeping them healthy. It's just that gentle stimulus to encourage them to grow on their own rather than forcing them to stretch. I think that's yeah, I think that's quite a good way of putting it. But so yeah, the idea of stretching 1 millimeter per month is far too quick, and that's because the tissue itself needs time to grow and to recover and to regenerate tissues and cells, and the fibers and the proteins within the tissue need time to regenerate. Might get a little bit sciencey, but I'm trying to think how to put it. I'm not necessarily good at getting my words across. But yeah, so in your skin, there's different proteins and molecules that are responsible for the health of the tissue and growing new tissue and new cells. When it comes to the actual skin, some of the most important ones are, sorry, cat's jumping about. Some of the most important ones are the collagen, which is like a fibrous protein that helps to bind the cells together, the individual skin cells together, and it helps to support structure and its overall maintain health of the tissue. And you have elastin in the skin, which is another protein, and that's what's important for keeping the tissue elastic, obviously, to help it bend and flex and and just move and glide over the stuff beneath, basically. But yeah, these proteins take quite a long time to actually develop and actually regenerate in the tissue. And what you can get away with, you might be able to get away with stretching too fast a little while, but after a while, the amount of damaged tissue that hasn't regenerated is going to build up and up and up, and that's when you're going to start running into problems, where you'll get lots of thick scar tissue, and that develops because you haven't given it enough time to settle down, and for the, like I say, the little molecules and the little protein molecules like collagen to actually regenerate within the cells and to provide that sort of healthy structure. Instead, you start to get the more thick fibrous proteins that result in scar tissue. People talking in the hall. But yeah, so as a general rule, I've seen a few different websites that seem to give slightly different timescales. This I've seen some websites that literally do say a month or two, but it seems like the overall consensus from what I've read is that 3 to 4 months is about the amount of time that it takes for the tissue to grow and for things like collagen and keratin and elastin to actually regenerate within the new cells and within the new tissue in order to keep it healthy. So that's what, at least with the earlobes, that's what I generally try to aim for, 3 to 4 months. Now, like I say, it's going to vary a lot between different people. In theory, younger people can probably get away with stretching faster than an older person because of the rate that typically after you're about 30, which I am now, the rate of collagen production within the skin actually starts to decrease. So after you get to my sort of age and later, you probably start needing to leave it even a little bit longer, which is a little bit of a shame. But yeah, anyway. So yeah, you need to start leaving it sort of, I'd say 3 to 4 months in between each stretch for something like an earlobe piercing. It's obviously going to be different with other piercings, like anything that goes through cartilage or thicker, gristly, more keratin-rich tissue, like a septum piercing or a conch piercing. They need to be much longer. With my septum, I normally leave it sort of 4, 5, 6-ish months in order to really allow it to settle in and relax. Because obviously, the tougher the tissue, the more time it's going to need to actually settle in place and to adjust to the new jewelry. And with the conchas, I normally don't stretch them more than twice a year at the very most. Sometimes not even that much. There's been times in the past where I've left them a year or more between individual stretches. I've been stretching this one a little bit quicker just to try to get it back up to where it was. So I say, especially something like a cartilage piercing. Once the cartilage itself is reshaped, it will shrink back a lot less than something like an earlobe, which is just tissue. So I've been stretching this one a little bit quicker than that to get it back to where it was. But certainly for new stretches, I leave that. I'll leave them a good 6 to 9 months, probably on average. I reckon about there, somewhere around there, I'd imagine. With the bridge piercing, I don't really know how long you're supposed to leave that at all. What would be generally recommended by people? I say there aren't too many people that seem to have experimented stretching bridge piercings. If you want a big bridge piercing, it seems generally easier just to actually scalpel them or even punch them. I've seen a couple of people use biopsy punches to actually start off with a larger gauge bridge piercing, which is interesting. I don't know how. I think you need really specific anatomy in order to do that because there's not a lot of tissue there anyway. If you're using something like a punch to actually literally cut a big hole through it and remove tissue, you're going to need a fair bit of tissue there to start with if that's something you were planning on doing. But yeah, I'd say that's certainly not something I would ever recommend looking into. If you're going to go either of those routes, probably scalping is going to be the better route, and even that you're going to need quite specific anatomy. Because if you suddenly wedge a great big tunnel or something in your bridge, the tissue there is relatively tight as it is, and that's just asking for the tissue to die off, putting something too big in straight away. But yeah, so trying to think. I'm sure there was something else I was going to mention as far as that sort of stuff goes. But yeah, so yeah, I guess that's as far as tips on how long I personally go about leaving piercings in between stretches. Like I say, at the end of the day, the real important thing is just to give the tissue enough time to regenerate and to actually sort of strengthen up and toughen up. Because like I was saying, you probably can get away a few stretches stretching too quickly, but each time you stretch you're going to be causing more damage, and that damage is just going to build up slowly and slowly and slowly over time until it's too much and the tissue is just wrecked. And at that point you're going to start getting more and more hard, solid scar tissue, and that's just going to cause issues stretching further down the line, because obviously you want the skin to be healthy and supple and yeah, just not hard tissue. Because in the long run that's just going to slow down your stretching further down the line. So yeah, basically that. So that I know you get these products like skincare creams and things that have collagen in them, and that isn't going to actually have any real effect whatsoever, from my opinion. I say a lot of these companies often push these products as being good for making your skin younger and making your skin softer because they have collagen in them, and that isn't, as far as I'm aware, that isn't going to help, because collagen molecules are too big to be absorbed by skin, and just having them lathered up with protein on the outside of your skin isn't really going to do much if it isn't being absorbed and then utilized by your body. So that's nothing that's really going to help. But having said that, the actual act of massaging the tissue in general can be a good thing. It can help to soften up scar tissue, especially newer scar tissues. newer scar tissue, it certainly can help, and that's more to do with the actual act of massaging itself, not so much what you're actually putting on them. Because the actual act of massaging itself, it helps to promote blood flow to the area, and that will obviously it will supply oxygen and nutrients to the tissue, which is what's necessary for the actual tissue to regenerate. Again, it all goes back to the regeneration of the tissue in between each stretch, or in between each gentle stimulus. Sounds so silly. But yeah, it really is, like I said before, it really is bad terminology to say stretching, really. So you shouldn't be, like I say, you shouldn't be forcing the tissue. It should be gently encouraging the tissue to grow on its own. But yeah, so yeah, using something like an oil, especially quite soon after the stretch. Ooh, someone mentioned me. Especially quite soon after the stretch, can really help to keep the tissue soft, because it encourages, it encourages a healthy blood flow and it'll help to encourage a healthy blood flow and flush any toxins around the tissue a lot quicker, and to supply nutrition to the tissue and to the cells, and that's obviously going to be important in keeping the tissue healthy. But yeah, it doesn't matter quite so much exactly what you're using, and that's why a lot of people often just recommend just plain vitamin E oil. I believe vitamin E can be absorbed by the skin, and it does have beneficial effects, again, as far as the tissue regeneration goes. But I don't know enough about that to really comment on it. That's one thing I've never really looked into. But yeah, so I'm sure I've got some oil up here somewhere. But yeah, I mean, what I generally use myself is bio oil. It really isn't necessary to use something like that, but it's not that expensive, and even a little pot lasts me a year or more. I mean, I oil up my lobes every single day, sometimes 2-3 times a day. Again, just for the act of massaging, to help improve the health of the tissue. But there's nothing wrong with just using something literally like an unscented vitamin E oil. There's plenty of other oils that I hear chucked around a bit. Like you hear jojoba oil, and you hear people using like sort of chamomile oil and things like that. But you never really know, if it's the start, you never really know how your body's going to be reacting to this sort of thing. And some things, especially stuff like chamomile, it can be very damaging to the skin. It can really dry the skin out. And so I know a lot of people will actually dilute chamomile oil, and in order to make it less harmful and less abrasive on the skin. But unless you know exactly what your skin needs, and exactly the percentage that is perfect for your skin, then you're better off just getting something like vitamin E oil anyway and not risking it. So, but yeah, that's just my opinions on that as far as oils and things like that go as well. So it's easiest just to stick to your vitamin E oil. I say the only reason I buy bio oil is just because, I don't know, that's the habit I'm in. I've gotten into. But yeah, I say if anyone was ever going to ask me for a recommendation for a specific type of oil, it would just be plain unscented vitamin E oil. Because again, it's more about the actual process of massaging rather than necessarily the oil itself that is going to give you the most benefits. But yeah, so I feel like I've been circling around in circles for the last few minutes now, so I'll call this quits here. I'll get this video uploaded, and then I'll sit down and start recording a couple of other videos once this is uploaded a little bit. Got some housework I want to be getting on with, and it's starting to get later in the day, so yeah. Thank you for watching through this. Hopefully you found it interesting, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye for now. Ta-ra.